Hey everybody. Sorry I am late. I did post a little chat thing, but as you can see, I have my headset on. I was in the process of recording my bi-weekly podcast, and it ran a couple minutes late as I thought it would, but normally I would not do that on a Saturday. In fact, I do not need this on anymore. I would do that on Sunday. However, I'm not a big time sports person except when it comes to American football. And I watch the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are playing in Germany. And that means it's happening tomorrow morning when I would normally be podcasting. But welcome to Watches with Dennis. We are not going to be talking about pinball podcasts. We are going to be talking about watches. And we have quite the slate today to go over. But first, let me thank those of you who have been patiently waiting. So, Kevin, good morning. Thank you for coming into the live stream. And Pixel Punch, welcome to the live stream as well. So in terms of catch up, we don't have a lot that we need to do before jumping right in, because I did not put out any pre-recorded videos over the last week. And normally I would summarize and plug those. So there's nothing to say in regards to that. As a reminder, there is a Discord channel that you can join. There's a link in the video description, and you can just click on that. And there's no like membership or anything that you need. It's free and open to everyone who wants to participate. And then if you want to support the channel further than just watching, but watching is the best thing you can do, you can always join the 99 Cent Club. And there is a link to do that as well. It gets you some badges. It gets you some emojis. There's a private Discord channel that's barely used. There's all sorts of stuff that's probably of questionable value to any and all of you. But with all of that said, let us go ahead and get into this watch content. So I think I've got 5 watches for us to talk about today, coupled with a line of watches that Breitling has. And this is all sort of summarized in the actual show notes. And as I have always done in the show notes, there is a link to each and every one of these articles that we will be using today. So let me go ahead and minimize my head. And let's go ahead and start with, I'm trying to think, am I a little dive watch heavy this time or not? Maybe not. Maybe it's a plurality of the content. Good morning, Tuna. Welcome to the live stream. And thank you for being a 99 Cent Club member. And apologies for cracking open my Coke Zero. But I've already gone through 3 cans because, as I just noted, I got finished podcasting approximately 2 minutes ago. Now, Bell & Ross, company I've never owned. I've never even handled a Bell & Ross watch. I'm not sure if there's a Bell & Ross dealer in the area or not. I've never really looked into it. And part of it is, I know they do more than these square style watches, but I don't care for the aesthetic that the square style is with the Bell & Ross format. And that's definitely the watch that's like always being promoted is this basic sort of shape where you've kind of got the circle and a square or some other version of their square. It's like the Monaco. The Monaco just doesn't resonate with me, whereas like the Santos does. But we talk about these things because some of these watches might be of interest to you. So in regards to this, here we go. It's a 300-meter water resistant dive watch. It's a limited edition version that is in regards to, I think it's the Terra Ocean Foundation, which I know nothing about, but I do live in a landlocked state. So what do you really expect out of me? So this model has been around for a while, I think about 5 years now. So this is just a different flavor of that. But as you can see from the photos here, it's got orange and blue, which apparently is the Collaborative Foundations color scheme that they like to go with. Matte blue surface with applied indices on the watch. And you see the minute track is printed at the chapter ring. 4:30 date window. I'm sure that's going to be relatively polarizing, very well color matched. And I actually like how they've kind of done this indentation to make it very circular looking. It doesn't look like the usual kind of a rectangular cutout. So I'll give them, we don't need to right click and save it. I don't like it that much. But I'll give them kudos for that. I already mentioned the 300 meters wire resistance. This uses the BR caliber 302. That is a Sellita SW300 base movement. So it's the 4 hertz, but it's at that typical, 38-hour power reserve that it feels like we've had for 50 years for those that rely upon this style of format. $5,600. So this is not an inexpensive watch. I'm not quite sure what the limited count is on that. This is a blue ceramic case. I didn't mention that, but the case is ceramic. That's something I think the line's been doing ever since 2017 when I think it first appeared. Oh, here's the number count: 999 versions of it. So not the most limited edition, but definitely not in the Seiko vein of let's make 15,000 of them. But anyway, it's it's a co-branding exercise. So some of this money is going to go towards the Bell Terra Foundation for their research that they do. But anyway, it was a new watch, definitely not of interest enough to me to go ahead and do a standalone video of it. So I wanted to go ahead and open the live stream with this one today. So while I go ahead and blow up some of these photos so you can get a better look, because, hey, we want to look at the images. And again, link in the video description to this article. This article is through a blog to watch. You can go and read it to your heart's content to see all of the breakdown. I do actually like this hand approach that they do as well. I'm trying to remember. There's another brand that kind of does the you can see the edging here if you're on a bigger screen where there's not loom, but where it almost feels like the loom is kind of hanging over. Because they have the broader hand base back here, and then it kind of extends out. There's another brand that's done this, and I think that version looked a little weird. This actually looks pretty good in an industrial way to accommodate. But with this sort of format, I like the industrial look. I don't like the shape. But catching up with the chat, Polipo, welcome. Glad you could make it again. And let's see, Tuna says the BR aesthetic is somewhat of an acquired taste. I'm not repulsed by it. And initially when I saw them, I think I almost had a visceral reaction to not liking this. I don't know if it's just because of the bezel and how it sits on top or anything, but I don't have that reaction anymore, but I still have zero desire to own one. Just zero. So let's see. Kay Benson is in the live chat. Welcome, by the way. Good morning, Dennis and others. I've been watching your archived streams for a while. This is the first time I've been able to pop into the stream live. Very much enjoy your content. Cheers. Well, thank you very much for the compliment. I do appreciate it. I do not stream at a convenient time for most people here in the morning in the United States, but I knew I needed to start being consistent with live streams. So that's when I do it, because it's usually, today was a mess because I put a podcast record right up against it. And normally I do all my podcasts on Sundays. But given that, I was able to otherwise only be a couple minutes late. And hey, I warned people in chat. See, here's my old message. I warned people. So anyway, normally it's not nearly as chaotic as it was today. But thank you very much. And I do appreciate it and hope you enjoy the content. So I didn't have a whole lot to say about that watch. I wanted to just go ahead and mention it as a recent reveal. And we actually have another recent reveal with a brand that I have absolutely no familiarity with whatsoever. I don't know, I've never manually managed or worked with Bell & Ross watches. I know about them. I've seen plenty of them on Chrono 24. I've seen other articles. We've probably talked about a few of them on this channel. I don't think I've ever talked about Armando Legin, if I'm even saying it right, which, as you all know, who've seen me for a while, know me as I probably am not saying it right at all. But the Invenio, that's got a line over this O, so I think I have to say it really long. Armando Legin Invenio. What an interesting dial, though. So this one, I picked the other one because I thought some of you might be interested in the Bell & Ross. I picked this one just because it's so weird. What a weird dial design. So again, link in the description. We're going to go ahead and go down because Monochrome summarizes the watch stats conveniently. I wish a blog to watch would do it. I whine about that like every episode, but I do like the writing style of the blog to watch. So technical specifications, and then we'll go back up and start looking at the photos again. This is a 42 millimeter case. It's 13.6 millimeters thick, very long lug to lug. This is a big watch, even though it's only 42 millimeters, which normally I would think is quite wearable. 53 millimeters lug to lug. That is massive. I'm trying to think if I've ever owned a watch that was 53 millimeters lug to lug. Maybe a Portuguese. The Portuguese IWC I used to have, it was around that, but I don't know if it was that big. 3D skeletonized stainless steel case, sapphire display case back, 100 meters of water resistance, black base watch, white minute track, and then they've got a transversal indicator for the hours and minutes, and we'll go up and explore that a little bit more. And using some Lumicast green elements. It's powered by the Caliber 1000 automatic, which is a Washer-based movement. I'm not familiar with Washer, but 50 hours of power reserve, 4 hertz, It's got anglage and all of the rest of it, and hand applied anglage. So now that I'm saying the fancy stuff, you've probably already looked down below. But if we're talking about rhodium plated pieces and hand applied anglage, then, or beveling, if you prefer, then not too surprising, $17,900 US. This is limited to 25 pieces. And their build speed, I thought this was very interesting that they advertised this in the article, 2 to 3 watches per month. So it ain't like you're going to get them all at once either. So they're not making very many and they can't produce them very quickly, but it's an $18,000 watch. So in terms of what's going on, here's a quick look at the case back. Yeah, we go. We got a nice blow up of this. So you can see the rhodium plating. We can zoom in a little bit more. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. You can kind of, again, on a, maybe not on a phone if you're watching on a phone, but you can kind of make out some of the mirror edging on the anglage, like around the balance cock here, and on maybe this part of the bridge. I'm sure they've done the other edges too. We just don't have a good look at it. But anyway, I don't really care how they cased it. But the dial itself is a very, very interesting format that they've got with, I think this moves in some capacity. And that's where I wish I could read and describe it to you at the same time. But I'm actually going to go ahead. You won't hear this, don't worry. So here we go. We have a video of it. So you can get a quick look about how this functions. So very, very cool. I think, like, visually, this is quite a, what's the phrase we like to use in watch collecting? Party trick. This is quite the party trick. So just a very, very neat whip around style look to that, and how the watch, and now it's recommending me all sorts of weird things like a Cinderella story and Seth Meyers A Closer Look. How fun. Of course, we are in incognito mode, so I guess it just randomly decides what it wants us to see. But that doesn't have anything to do with the watches, which is why it was weird. So anyway, very interesting take. Even if they are using some other base movement, which perhaps was, and I'm assuming is, outside of Armando Legin's development, the way they've implemented it, the way it moves on that dial, and so quickly too, very visually interesting. It's so limited. I highly doubt I'm ever going to encounter anyone that actually has this watch. Given what it does, I don't, this is where, you know, you've been in the watch hobby too long. I don't instinctively think that the $18,000 price point is ridiculous for what it is. Now, that being said, I always struggle a bit with steel watches that end up in that price range, or like around 20,000 in particular, because steel is such an inexpensive metal. And I know that they mark up the pricing on precious metal watches way more than the value of the metal. But it's just, you know, it's just one of those things where you're like, well, there's so many other steel watches available. Now, we know plenty of other ones that, I mean, Parmigiani's got their steel. We got the Lucent steel out of Chopard that's going to go over $20,000. So obviously there are exceptions. We are talking luxury pieces. The biggest problem, I think, is what Tuna has actually noted, where it's a new brand to Tuna. I think this is a new brand to lots of people. In fact, I mean, it's a new brand to me. I don't recall if the article said if this was a new brand. I don't know the history of this brand, or all right, it's his debut. Yeah, makes his debut. So here's the challenge. It's a new brand. Now, maybe Armando has experience from working with other, like, he may be known, but I mean, it's a watchmaker out of Slovenia, which is not a country that people regularly associate with watch production. Again, watches can be made anywhere, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But, you know, this amount of money, it really has to come down to the coolness factor of it, I think, because you're not buying pedigree, you're not buying anything else. It's just a really, really interesting concept, though. And given that, I think it was worth talking about. So anyway, they've got the article goes into a whole bunch. I'm not going to read the article to you. So article does go into Armando a bit and get into more details. I haven't dived in enough to have explored it to do a decent summary beyond what I've said, but I wasn't sure if it was a brand, like if this was a second watch or anything, but it is their first. This is not a first watch, so let's move on to the next one. Certina, another company I've never owned, but again, we see them talked about an awful lot because Certina is one of those brands that is very well established, especially in the dive space at the affordable end of the spectrum. So a lot of people that are into affordable divers Certina is one of those brands that ends up in the conversation. Orange dial here, which of course, very Doxa-esque when we think about it. I believe this is titanium though, but again, we're at Fratello this time. Link in the article, in the video description, I should say, to the article. Here are your quick stats, however. So this is called the DS Super, and they have the model number, the PH1000M. This is a 43.5 millimeter diameter watch, 14.15 millimeters thick. I think that's okay for a dive watch of this diameter. Orange or black dial are available, so it doesn't have to be the orange that I showed you at the top of the screen. We'll go back over the photos here in a little bit. It's only 900 Swiss francs. Orange. It's actually cheaper in black at 845 Swiss francs. It's about the same, so it's going to be around $1,000 US. The orange version is limited. I guess that's why I didn't realize that. So the orange version is limited to 1,000 units. So that's, I guess, why they went ahead and added 55 francs to the price. Excuse me, Swiss francs to the price point. Comes on a black strap, rubber strap, pin buckle style. It's hours, minutes, seconds with date. 60-minute timing bezel. It does have a helium valve. It's powered by the Powermatic 80.611. So that's that. You know it if you know Swatch Group and you know like the PRX. So that's the 80-hour power reserve 3 hertz movement. That is a pretty decent workhorse from what I've been hearing so far. It is a relatively new movement, so we don't have long-term numbers on it yet. Steel case, which is of course what you would expect at under $1,000, and it does offer 1,000 meters of water resistance. So again, with the thickness of 14.15, I think that's pretty reasonable given I guess you can get it on a bracelet too. Pretty reasonable given the size of the watch and the depth rating that it allows. So the shape of this is, to me, very almost turtle-esque, though Seiko turtles would have moved the crown out of the 3 o'clock position. It's interesting in terms of how it tapers down for the case back and stuff. But again, it's a little over 14 millimeters, which isn't too bad for 1,000 meters of water resistance. I mean, I've not owned a 1,000 meter water resistance dive watch, so. But looking at other ones where we've talked about the deep divers and stuff, like if we were to start to pull, well, just the Planet Ocean, I mean, we'd be probably getting over that, especially when we get up to like the same this like 43.5 diameter. I think the Planet Oceans you'd compare to would be the 45.5 millimeter diameter, but that thickness really starts to add up on these things. So I do appreciate that it seems pretty reasonable. Closed case back. Oh, look, they, I think, are celebrating the turtliness is extra turtly here with our little turtle. So I feel better about my interpretation on the shape of that watch case. But overall, pretty good. I mean, it's nothing I would necessarily say to write home about, other than if you wanted a really high performance diver. I did not know you could get 1,000 meters of water resistance in a watch package at around or under $1,000. So that part interested me a bit. There's going to be some other, obviously, cost-cutting measures that you see at this price point. The fact that the date windows are not color matched is pretty typical to the branding. I do kind of wish, again, I've seen this on cheaper watches. This isn't unusual. I'm just going to opine. I kind of like it when dive watches change the minute hand and the lume pip, if we're just doing the one lume pip, to being a different color than the rest of the lume. This is something like the Super 7s that Rotary makes did, and Omega likes to do this as well. And I think the reason is that way it's real easy to do the dive timing and track it, because the part you are lining up, the minute hand and the pip, are the one color, and then everything else is to make it easier for what we mortals want the lume for, which is to read the watch in the dark. So again, that's something they could have done at this price point, but they chose not to. Hand shape, I think, I don't love this, but it allows for generous lume. So I think it's a clean execution. There's nothing I really dislike about this. I actually like the bezel markings. I like full graduated bezels aesthetically. I think I could see it as a busy look, but I think for dive watches that are like really embracing the diviness, that I like it. I also like it when they fully lume them, though. So, but it is a generous, as we just saw with the image, it is a generous lume pip. So I think they did a pretty good job. And at the price point, it's really hard to complain about too much here. So it's very robust. I think, you know, I probably wouldn't be in the market. Well, not probably. I wouldn't be in the market for it myself because to me, the 1,000 meters of water resistance is moot. It's like outside of 200 meters, after 200 and above, I kind of feel like if I was going to swim in a watch, I'm already going to be comfortable at 100 meters. If I was actually thinking, like, I don't dive, but if I was to dive, 200 is going to get me through anything I would ever do. So in that regard, this watch has a lot of competition because, while I appreciate that it's like just under $1,000, there's a lot of, Seiko's raised its prices recently, but Seiko offers a lot of watches with a lot more variety of aesthetic design that aren't going to have the 1,000 meters of water resistance, but might look better or look better to me, that are going to come in cheaper than this watch. You got a lot of prospects options out of Seiko that are at your disposal. And that's not even getting into the other brands that are competing. This is a crowded space. And that $500 to $1,000 dive watch price tier is pretty competitive. There are a lot of micro brands that are playing in that space. And then you've got brands like Seiko and Orient that have been in it a long time and offer an awful lot of opportunity for less money. And yeah, about the only thing I could tell you off the top of my head that you give up is you don't get 1,000 meters of water resistance. So I think this appeals to people that really want that bragging right to be able to say, oh, no, this is 10 times more than your standard sports watch. And outside of that, everything about it's good. I mean, it's clean, it's well executed, but it's not anything to write home about. Those are my takes. So let me catch up with the chat. Tuna says Certina and Mido or Mido. Do we know how to say? I'll say Mido for now. Seem to be neglected in the UK. Yeah, I don't. Again, I'm being in the US. All I could tell you is I hear about Certina and Mido a lot when people ask the question, like they go on Reddit or something and say, "Could you tell me some affordable divers that aren't Seiko?" And then people will be like, okay. And then they might say Orient, and then they'll go ahead and they'll start saying in things like Mido, Certina, and then you'll start getting into, like, depending how high up you're willing to go, maybe Zealous comes up, Raven. I mean, they're all sort of, then the micro brands start to come in as well. So, but these are more established. I do, aside from the depth thing, that this comes with a Powermatic 80, which is getting a lot of love lately. I think a lot of people, and I don't think it's that people have necessarily fallen in love with the movement per se, but given it's driven so much of Tissot's affordable line, like the Gentleman, the PRX in particular, I think a lot of people are really liking the fact that there are affordable watches that offer an 80-hour power reserve and then tend to be pretty accurate, I think, because of how they align the hairspring. So it's just not sticking in a Miyota probably does them some favors here too, and will help justify some of the pricing. The thing is, it obviously doesn't justify all of it because you can go into like the PRX space for around like $600 to $700 US. So it comes in several hundred less. That said, it's not a dive watch and doesn't offer anything remotely like the specifications that are provided by this Certina. So I don't want to apples to apples it too much. Just want to go ahead and throw it out as something worth noting. Benson says, late comment that if I ever win the lottery, I'd put that Armando Legin on the list for the purchase for purchase right after I buy a UN Freak. I do have a thing for unique dials, I guess. I am less so. I'm far more conservative in my watch aesthetic. If I were to, like, between the two, I probably still would lean Freak more, but this is a business decision solely because if for some reason I end up not liking the watch, I know it would be easier, or at least in my head, it's easier to unload Ulysse Nardon than it is a brand new brand. That said, that brand is so limited at 25 pieces for that watch that, and I'll go ahead and throw it back up here on the screen. I still have it open. That, you know what, maybe it'd probably not be hard to sell. You might not be able to find a place that would take it on trade, but it'd probably be pretty easy to sell. So honestly, you'd probably be safe either way. It is a really cool looking feature. The Freak, it was such a game changer when it came out, though, that I guess I would probably lean towards that. But I tend to fall in line with more traditional brands anyway. Benson says, I also dig the case shape of the Invino, and watching that dial in action is pretty darn cool. Yeah, I got to admit the video was the best part. Was the best part. Aesthetically, like I again, let me just throw it right back up here again. There's other things that I probably would like the Freak over versus this. Like I'm just not like the font choices and stuff are all just very okay. Again, it's like it's like you look at this and it's really interesting in terms of how they laid it out. But font, color, loom placement, the Arabic way they're printed, it's all really, really pedestrian. And then what the watch does with all of it is what's interesting. Whereas I think the Freak comes in, since you brought it up, I'll bring it up as a comparison. Freak comes in and just looks, I mean, even like winding the Freak is weird. Everything, I mean, Freak is a really good word for it. So there's just so much that's interesting about it. But this is definitely a more special piece simply because it is exceedingly limited. Now, whether or not Armando makes more that are just different colors or something down the line, if this does well for him, we'll have to wait and see. But interesting nonetheless. Then Frank, welcome to the live stream, Frank. I know you've been on before. All that power reserve is like all the depth rating. It's not needed. That's true. I guess it depends though on how you wear the watch. So 80 hours, I think, is excessive for pretty much any practical purpose that anyone, or at least any way I would ever wear a watch that I could readily think without concocting really goofy scenarios. I am a big proponent of wanting watches that ideally can get around, I don't have a hard and fast line, so maybe this isn't a really good example, but I guess something on the order of, like if it's 72 or above in particular, I'm usually pretty pleased. I'd say past 48, but I mean a little bit more than that. And the reason I mention that is I know a lot of people, not me, because I wear a watch every day. Oh, and I guess, okay, wristwatch check today. I'm wearing the Pioneer Center Seconds, the Moser blue black edition, which I actually wore to work yesterday. I almost never can wear this watch to work because I usually wear long sleeve dress shirts and it does not slide under a cuff. But I had CPR training, so I wore a short sleeve shirt so that I could work on the mannequins. And thus I had an excuse to wear the Moser. The issue with the power reserve when is a lot of people take their watch off when they get home from work on Friday night, and they would like to be able to pick it back up and put it on Monday morning. And while I love hand winding a watch, a lot of people just hate it. They just want it to get up and go with it. So 48 hours would get you through Saturday and Sunday, but that part with the Friday evening, I need a little bit more. So it's really not 70. I'm really thinking like 55 to 60 hours. Once you cross that, I think any more power reserve than that is excessive to ridiculous. You don't really need it if it's like your own, but thinking from about a person who only has one watch and doesn't want to invest in a winder, because why would they with one watch, and doesn't want to have to always set it. There's that's the main, because there are a lot of people that I've who've come in or commented on these videos who say they don't wear watches on the weekend. So I know it's common. So that's what I think about with power reserves. That's my only real big gripe with the ETA 2824s and the Sellita 300s and 200s and stuff not being modified is those 38 hours of power reserve. They don't even get you through 2 days. And it's very reasonable to expect people to take off their watch over 2 days. It's reasonable. So at this point, we should be beyond needing to do that. But that being said, I mean, I'll still buy watches that way, but I rotate watches so much. The power reserves mean nothing to me. I usually change my watch every day or two. I very rarely wear the same watch for 3 days in a row. So it's just one of those interesting things. And we are going to move on to another interesting thing here in a moment. Let me go ahead and do Benson's chat comment here. The Freak is my grail watch for sure. I got to try one on at a watch event and totally fell in love with it. I have still never handled a Freak. I don't think we have a UN dealer here in the Kansas City area, but I do need to check because I have been looking at not the Freak for me. Again, I lean more boring, but I have been looking more and more at UN, especially now that they're not under the Carrying Group, because I think maybe we're going to see a little bit more experimentation out of them. I'd like to see them do something new that's not the Freak, but isn't traditional. It might be something I would never consider buying, but I'd still like to look at it. Because I like looking at even I don't imagine myself wearing a Freak. I like looking at it because it's just a cool timepiece. Yes, I use the dreaded word timepiece instead of watch, but to me, it's elevated beyond. Now, what's not elevated beyond wristwatch space but I think was actually executed very, very well aesthetically, is this new Zenith Chronomaster Sport. This is the Aaron Rodgers edition. Now, full disclosure, I am not an Aaron Rodgers fan. I'm not a Packers fan. I watch the Chiefs because I am in Kansas City, and American football is the one sport that I invest any time into watching. And so I would never buy this watch for a variety of reasons. But that said, I really like the Zenith Chronomaster Sport. I think of their recent watches, setting aside what's going on in the Defy line, because there's a lot of really interesting things that I think are happening in Defy's space. But Defy often tends to come in at a really, really high price point. And Zenith isn't a particularly cheap brand to begin with in the luxury space. I mean, we're talking luxury watches, and they're not cheap, period. But even amongst like luxury, like you can get into Omegas and Tudors a lot lower retail than Zenith. Zenith usually takes a big bath on the gray market. However, when these watches, this line of watches, the Chronomaster Sport came out with the new version of the El Primero movements, they were a hit for Zenith. It was a long time before the gray market had these, and the secondhand prices were basically the same as retail. I remember during the pandemic, because I was looking not at this colorway, but at some of the original colorways. I actually ended up with a Zenith Chronomaster Original, which also appealed to me because this one in its original color schemes looks a whole lot like a Daytona. And I didn't want a Daytona clone, but saying all that aside, it's still, I think, the Daytona is popular for a reason too. It's a very well executed watch. And I think this is similarly as well. So again, we'll go ahead and go down to the stats on this. This is, again, link in the video description. You can go and actually read this article. This is at Monochrome. So this is a $12,800 watch. It is limited, 250 pieces, 41 millimeters in diameter, 13.6 millimeters thickness, 47 millimeters lug to lug. It's quite wearable for a chronograph. And I believe those are all identical specs to what the other Chronomaster Sports have been from Zenith. Stainless steel case, mix of brushed and polished elements. You'll see that a little bit more later on. You have the fixed ceramic bezel that has the 1/10 of a second scale on it. And the reason for that is the center seconds hand actually whips around the dial once every 10 seconds. Date at the 4:30 window. And then you have a sunray brushed green dial with tricolor subdials and anthracite, light gray, and silver. So, and it's the El Primero 3600 that does that 1/10 of a second. Now, the old El Primeros were capable of 1/10 of a second accuracy. However, the center of this chronograph seconds hand would run around the dial once every minute, like it does in many traditional chronographs. This one, though, we'll go to a different photo, whips around. There's the movement. Whips around one time every 10 seconds. So each one of these markings, the reason why it's always been capable of 1/10 of a second accuracy, if you didn't know, is because the movements are 5 hertz. So they tick and talk and they go 10 times per second because of that. And so each one of these really, really cleanly will let you read your 1/10 of a second. In addition, the way this subdial at the 3 o'clock position works, if you're not familiar, is it goes around once every second of the chronograph. So while this will go around, we'll be at the 10 when we get back up to the 10 here, because you see the seconds are labeled here, 3, 4, 5. So it's all just designed really, really well for you to be able to easily read to a 1/10 of a second. Now, that's probably more accuracy than you need with your chronograph, and you can start to question whether or not you can push the plungers quick enough to be able to get away with doing that. But anyway, that's how they do it. Color match date window. I'm fine with 4:30 date windows. That'll still be polarizing with people, but the original El Primero movement came with the 4:30 date window. This has been a part of Zenith's DNA forever, so it's going to kind of be a love it or hate it. Zenith is not going to get rid of that in a lot of these instances. They do actually have El Primero watches with date windows at the 6 o'clock. They're old. They use the older movements because they've come up with other movements since then. And I do like that they stuck with the tri-dials, the tricolor of the dials. Sometimes on the special versions, like the Pandas and stuff, they'll make them all the same color. That part of, I think, that quirky Zenith charm of their Chronomaster line is doing the tricolor. And so something that distinguishes them from Rolex. So that's something that I am glad that they were able to stick with on this particular watch. But well, I do like green. It's definitely not a watch for me because I am in no way an Aaron Rodgers fan. Obviously, it's not screaming the branding when you're actually wearing the watch, but it's just not. It's just not for me. But I think it actually, and with the little tips of yellow and everything, worked like as a aesthetic, as a watch. It works really well. If you're really into this colorway, or you're a Packers fan, I guess either way, it'll go pretty well. Now, maybe I'm wrong because Matthew is on and he's saying he's at the Jets now. When was this designed? Jets are green, but the yellow wouldn't track. I thought this was based off of his Packers stint, but nope, I am wrong. Wait, he with the Packers? Am I right? Am I misremembering who he played for? No, yeah, he was with the Packers. Okay, I'm pretty sure it was. I didn't remember he was with the Jets anymore. I didn't because he's been injured all season. I haven't even really thought about him. But okay, so you know what? I don't know. It's so they're arguing in this article that the green represents both him being with the Packers and the Jets, but the yellow aspect. Let's see. Let's see, because it was green with gold, right? When he was with Green Bay. So the yellow seems to be more of the Packer feel, which would help explain, besides my just remembering him being with the Packers forever. I don't know. They're also arguing some of the colorway. I think it's an amalgamation of it because they're arguing. But again, the authors might be trying to shoehorn who he's with the current team he's on. Who knows which is the case here. But let's see. The Arabic numerals are inspired by the numbers used on the jerseys of the New York Jets. That is something that looks different as well as what they did with the numbers. I saw those and I thought, I'm not sure that feels like how the watches originally looked. So I guess that's a change up as well. That it works pretty well, I guess. But yeah, I guess take your pick which team it represents. Because yeah, I didn't think of the yellow at all with the Jets, but hey, it stands out. It works well with the watch. Maybe we should just focus on that. It works well with the watch. Let's not look too closely, Matthew. Let's let some of this slide. Who knows what's going on anymore? Pixel Punch says, hot take. I think the regular color and dial variation of the Chronomaster Sport is more attractive than the Daytona. Are we thinking white or black dial? White dial, I agree with you. Between the two black dials, I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm not a big Daytona fan. And part of the reason I actually prefer the Chrono, which is why I bought one. I prefer the Chronomaster Original, which is a smaller watch. It's a 38 millimeter watch, to these Chronomaster Sports. I feel it feels far more unique, and you still get the tricolor and you still get all the functionality. My only fear, because there's no Zenith dealer in Kansas City. So I actually got mine through Joma Shop. My only fear, though, was that it was going to be too small. And I knew I could wear 38 millimeter. I was afraid it would be too small to realistically use the chronograph. It works fine for me. So I actually prefer the Chronomaster Original, and they've done some interesting color. Like there's a Hodinkee collaboration with a salmon dial that actually looks pretty sharp, in my opinion, as well. But I like that overall format a little bit better. You don't have the bezel like you do here. In fact, I'll search one up here so you guys can see it, because I think it's interesting. Or it's interesting to me. So we're gonna talk about it. But you still have the timing. They just had to like drop it into the chapter ring and such. So very, very interesting. So, and Pixel Punch says white dial. So yeah, with white dial, I do agree with you. I think the Daytona is a more attractive. The Sport, the Zenith Chronomaster Sport is more attractive than the Daytona, in my opinion. So let's see if I can find you I know I'm not screen sharing yet because I'm trying to make sure I'm actually not. Zenith has a whole bunch of like load screens. So I guess I'll subject you to some of them. There we go. This is the model I went with. I'll let you see some of the footage of them. They come in some other colors. I got the one with the white silver dial. It actually looks more silver in most light forms. Only in really bright white light does it look stark white. So, because they made some others like panda dials and stuff like that. But you see the timing's all on the inside because the watch is so much smaller because there's no external. The bezel is just a standard little metal bezel. So anyway, that's the format I actually prefer a little bit over the Sport. But as you can see, the layouts are very, 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 very similar. So anyway, and they came with a variety of colorways as well, and some strap options and all of that. So anyway, that is Zenith, and that's the Chronomaster original. Much more vintage look, but again, appeals to my more conservative tastes, I think. Okay, we're making pretty good time. I was afraid I put too many watches in for discussion here. And maybe this is where we're going to sync all of it up. But before I move on, I see Scotty. Welcome to the live stream, by the way. Scotty says, if they make a Taylor Swift Travis Kelce collaboration, would you be interested? Interested? Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Here's the thing. I'm not a Swiftie, right? That's what they call them, Swiftie. So like, I don't really know Taylor's music. All I know is she's super, super popular. And I know Travis Kelce because he's played with the Chiefs for a number of years, and he's, excellent tight end, has done really, really well, works well with Patrick Mahomes. I'd have to see how the watch would look. I'm not like inherently a huge Kelce fan or inherently, and I'm not a Taylor Swift fan at all. I have nothing, like, I don't dislike her. I just not my I might like her music. I just honestly haven't listened to it. So it just come down to what the watch would look like. Maybe the better question would be is, if there was a Chiefs themed watch, would I buy it? Maybe. I actually don't wear a lot of Chiefs clothing. Like, I have some t-shirts and stuff that I wear sometimes. Like today I'm wearing my Nordman shirt, which is a podcast joke that we do on the Pinball Show, which is on the Pinball Network, because I was recording today for them and I had to put my hat on because I was not going to have time to recomb my hair after having this headset on the 2 minutes I ran late before I could get onto this live stream. So I don't normally record on Saturdays. So anyway, but like I like red on a watch. I have one red watch. I have an Orient Cano that's got the red dial, kind of that really radial, well, kind of like how it's not fume like the Mosers do, but it's got that radiant kind of glow, like the Sunbrush style look to it. And that's my only red watch, but I do like red watches. So I'd be open to it. Let me put it that way. Long story short, Scotty, I'd be open to a Taylor Swift Kelce collaboration watch. But I need to see the pricing. I need to see the aesthetic, because I won't buy it just because it says Chiefs on it. Hello, Neff. Welcome to the live stream. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member. And we are going to move not to a watch, to a lineup of watches. Breitling. Guys, I occasionally talk about Breitling. I talked a little bit way back at the start of 2023. I was kind of contemplating maybe getting into one of the Navitimers because they started having some sizable, larger time-only Navitimers in particular. But the chronograph ones were interesting too, and that's the more typical model. But we're not going to be talking about that. We're actually going to talk about a different lineup of chronographs. Breitling, much like Zenith, very well known for their chronographs. And this is they've redone the Avenger line. So the Avenger, now B01 chronographs, 40, mostly, actually it's a mix. I think we got some 44 millimeter versions and we got some 42 millimeter versions. So they're all like bigger watches, right? So anyway, Breitling has decided to go ahead and revamp. Here's a photo, I think, of all of them, question mark. I don't know if it's all of them or not. It's a whole lineup. So that's just kind of like, I'm throwing it in the live stream. I didn't have time to read the article. So we're going to be exploring this together a little bit, but they've gone ahead and they've done some modifications to this. So apparently, according to the article, which again, link in the video description so you can go and read it, they have a 44 millimeter chronograph, 44 millimeter GMT version, and a 42 millimeter time only. I can't say time only. It's a time watch, three-handed time watch. I don't know if it has the date or not because I have not scrolled far enough yet to see whether or not it does or does not. So they've gone ahead and they've got this, and there were some issues with, I guess, according to the write-ups from George Kearns, the CEO, the Chronomat and the Avenger were looking too much alike. So this is an attempt to go ahead and let the Avenger have some more of its distinct DNA. Now, depending on the model, really influences the I don't know if I want to say the quality of the movement, but let's put it this way. It really influences whether or not you're going in-house with the Avenger or you're going with an EBOSH movement. And remember, or if you don't know, bear in mind, Breitling likes to brand, Tudor does this too, brand the third-party movements like their first party, but they're not. Now, they don't go around saying that they're first party, in-house, I should say in-house, but they'll often give them a cute little Breitling name, and then you find out it's like a Solita. So anyway, The chronographs are going to be using, again, B01. So the B01 in-house movement, 70-hour power reserve. That's that movement. I've not owned a watch with the B01 in it. That's the chronograph movement that I believe Tudor is also using in their chronographs, because they've done some tech sharing with Breitling. And from all reviews I've read, has done very, very well. The B01 is an extremely popular movement. So that is a very robust option if you're going with, and you can see a couple of the chronograph iterations here that exist. You got 4 different dial colors available actually on the chronograph 44. You've got green, black, brown, and blue. And the pricing in euros, because again, we're over at Fratello, and who knows what pricing you're going to get until you start looking, would be you can either get it on strap for 7,600 euro or on bracelet for 7,900 euro. 44 millimeter, as the name would suggest, but they are 15.2 millimeters thick. Not too bad for a chronograph. 53 millimeters lug to lug. So again, kind of like we were talking about with the Certina. I think it was the Certina. It's that's a pretty sizable lug to lug. So no, actually, I guess it was the Armando that had that 53 millimeter lug to lug. So you got those options, and then you've also then got the we got a ceramic version as well. I did not realize that. So they got even more versions. They're night mission ones that are in the ceramic case, but otherwise very, very similar configuration. Then you've got the GMT. The GMT is still in the 44 millimeter case, much thinner, 12.05 millimeters thick. Still 53 millimeters lug to lug, so it's thinner, but otherwise it has the same profile. It's about 5,000 to 5,500 euros, depending on you're getting with it with a folding clasp or the pin buckle. And it is not a Traveler GMT. This was the one thing I did see this part, and this is the part that shocked me. So we can maybe have a discussion with the live chat if what you guys think about the decision to go ahead and do a collar GMT format on a, well, I mean, euros to dollars are pretty similar. So basically we're talking a $5,000 watch with a collar GMT movement. And that's the Breitling Caliber 32. That is an ETA movement. So the Caliber 32 is the 2893. So just be aware, 42-hour power reserve, collar GMT functionality. And then in 42 millimeters, 42 by 12.15 millimeters thick. So it's actually a little bit thicker than the GMT watch, but it is shorter. 51.2 lug to lug millimeters is their time plus date watch. And that one comes in at about 4,500 euros, kind of depending if you're going bracelet or strap. So I'll go ahead and blow up the photos here so you can start to just sort of explore and enjoy those while we go ahead and get caught up with the chat. Here's an example of 42 millimeter time only. And let's see, Neff pushes back against everything I praised about the B01, saying he is not a fan of it. It seems unrefined. Interesting. Do you just mean like in terms of the movement finishing, or is there something like mechanically about it that you don't like? I actually have not really explored looking at it too much, because it seemed to me that in a number of instances, it's actually not put in a display case back. And so that would, I mean, in terms of finishing, that would lend credence to that. Maybe they don't like to, refine the look of the movement. If they're willing to hide their shame, I'm big into that. I'm all about Tudor putting closed case backs on their watches, because they don't seem to want to be bothered to decorate any of their movements. But with Breitling, I just typically, they're such a tool watch oriented entity. I've always just sort of associated them more with doing closed case back iterations. Here's an example of the GMT watches that I mentioned. Collar GMT format. Aesthetically, an interesting look. I've never been really enamored with these Avenger bezels, and the Chronomat's the same way. It's actually, they've grown on me. The Chronomat more so, because again, this is new. I've been looking at the Chronomats a little bit. Just the overall package didn't really work for me. But I always thought it was a little weird with these jut outs. Very, very industrial, industrial looking. So I think they worked it pretty well. Here's one of the ceramic case GMT versions. I think I like the chronograph look the best on these. Personally, I still prefer the Navitimer. I don't like cropped Arabic numerals with subdials, so that would be a problem for me. Like I wouldn't end up getting it. That's part of the reason I don't favor this over what the Navitimers do. But I mean, overall, like this, I'm okay with. Without the Arabic numerals, I can get behind this a lot easier. But that's just me. I don't know. Like I prefer push, like the plunger pushers, not these more rectangular ones. I get it because it kind of gives a more smooth case profile. Really large crown. again, just really, really industrial in terms of the overall look. Neff further clarifies regarding the B01 mechanically. Pushers feel awful. The winding is extremely heavy. You have to manhandle it. Okay, that's interesting. That would probably bother me quite a bit as well. Then when I had the Portuguese, the IWC Portuguese, the one with the pocket watch style movement, that was horrible to wind. The crown felt too small. I never thought I'd say a crown felt too small. The crown felt too small. And especially as you wound it, I'm assuming it was because it used it's one of the older models. It used a pocket watch movement in it. I actually would have to like grab a microfiber cloth like this to grip it. I was actually hurting my fingers to get it to full wind. And that was a hand wind only movement. And it was just, I felt like I had no leverage. It felt unrefined. Like they didn't sit there and think, oh, we need to put an onion style crown on this watch because it's so hard to get enough torque to wind the big old pocket watch mainspring in it. It was just such a weird thing. That's part of the reason I traded that watch away towards a different dress watch. Was I was just like, as it was a big watch. I probably shouldn't have gone with that size of one. It didn't hang over, but it was super close. But I just couldn't get around that the winding experience was actually not pleasant. And most of the time I enjoy hand winding. So I'm usually like, if a watch says hand wind only, unless it's like a perpetual calendar or something where I'd be like, no, I'm all for a hand wind only. I'm more than happy to take one, especially if we can shave some thickness off the watch. But that just pushed me over. I just couldn't keep that Portuguese. It's too bad too. It was a beautiful watch. Frank says, I'm always a fan of an exhibition caseback, even if the movement isn't highly decorated. See, and some people, and I think that's why Tudor's doing it. Well, in part. I think Tudor does it in part for that. And then in some instances, like the gold watch they came out with and the silver of the Black Bay 58s, I think they did it to save money, especially the gold watch, because why would you put an 18 karat gold caseback on a watch when you can just put a cheap old sapphire crystal that's for like $100? So in that instance, it screamed at me cheaping out. But I know a lot of people really like to look at the movements and appreciate it. I actually own more close caseback watches than display caseback. So I overall don't care as much. I only really want to see the movements if they're decorated at this point. And part of my motivation for that is there's already a market space like with like Seiko 5 and stuff where you can go in and get, like Hamilton does it a lot too. There are a lot of readily affordable display caseback watches that I think make sense because for a lot of people going in and buying the watch like that, they're paying a few $100s. They want to enjoy visually that it's a mechanical watch. And then to me, it's like a bell curve. So you have that part where it makes sense, affordable, people getting their first mechanical watches, they want to be able to enjoy the movements. And I'd much rather them do that than do open hearts. I hate open hearts. And then you're like bell curves up where you're starting to get into this other space where it's like the real mechanical tool watches, which in those instances, I think, they're not decorating the movements, close case back those, get the thinness down and do all of that. And then you start to go on the other side of the bell curve where you're getting really expensive, higher end luxury. And it's like, at this point, they need to be decorating the movements and they should be showing them off. So I think like both, like I want it to be display case back and there better be Geneva striping. And if we're getting over like $15,000, there better be anglage. I want mirror polishing. I want polished screws, things like that, But we all have our own tastes. So that's the Dennis rabbit hole of the Dennis bell curve of display case backs, which is probably a weird way to. I'm probably not in the minority. I'm probably not in the majority on how I view the case back thing. But anyway, that's how I see it. Scotty agrees with Frank, however. He wants the movement shown on these luxury watches. Eddie, welcome to the live stream, Eddie. Eddie Jones says, I like exhibition backs. I love seeing the engine room doing its job. Okay, see, again, I'm in the minority on my weird bell curvy views. Neff says, unless there's something worth seeing, I don't want to see the movement, especially if the case is precious metal. I'd rather keep it closed and thinner. You started to side with me. It's a little tough with me on, because at this point, dress watches that are watches that are precious metal at this point are so pricey that I generally expect them to go ahead and decorate the movement. But you know, especially if you go a little more vintage and don't have to go super far back, even in the 90s. Yeah, like Breguet, they'd usually go ahead and close case back those precious metal dress watches. And I think they still decorate the movements. It's like that was the standard. You could, Neff, do a why not both approach. I think Patek, if I say it right, Patek Philippe does this sometimes, where a watch will come and you might be able to pop open the closed case back. Now, that didn't help the thinness angle you were arguing, but lets you look at and enjoy the movement there. And then you can close it kind of like a pocket watch. And then you could close it and then have the solid gold or, well, solid 18 karat gold case back. So Tuna says, open hearts are the pits. Even when I first got into watches, I never have liked open hearts. I think it's the asymmetry that they induce into the dial and there's just no way to balance it, right? Because a watch doesn't have two balances, at least no watch that does an open heart would. And so it just doesn't work for me. But I also don't like skeletonized watch dials. So let's be fair. I hide behind the asymmetry to make you be on my side with the argument. But in reality, I basically hate seeing movement things through the dial in most instances. There are some brands that have done some reasonably legible watches. Cartier is perhaps the one that does the most, that I think actually have attractive case backs or skeletonized dials. But given that they are a jewelry brand, you would hope that if anyone could actually make it look good, it would be them. And Neff adds, I'm specifically referring to the 18K Black Bay. That's what I mean. That and the new Platonia. Okay. I would agree in your case. In those cases, yes. We do have one more watch before I end this stream. So that was the Breitling new Avenger collection. Go and check out the photos in the article to explore those more thoroughly. And now we're going to end with another brand that I never heard of. We already talked about this one earlier. Armando Legin, which is brand new, was their debut watch. Here's one that is a new brand as well. How do we say this? I don't know German. Löbner? I don't know how to say this. It's not an umlaut, is it, when it's on an O? Isn't that just with a U? Well, it's a German. Löbner. Does that sound? I hope I'm saying it Germany enough. All right. They've got a couple of watches here. The Steel Racer and the Rocket Man. But I don't think there's any Elton John collaboration going on here. These dials were super interesting. Actually, the two versions, Steel Racer and Rocket Man, are actually really, really similar. Now, these are being sold at the Bucherer. So Rolex bought Bucherer. Bucherer has its own brand. This is not a Bucherer brand, but these watches are only sold through Bucherer. And I believe you can go to the website and order them. So you don't have to go to the store. But so these Löbner watches are going along, and they are a couple of different, there's a lot of footage here about like the race car inspirations and stuff about that. But I want to go ahead and get down to the specs, and then we'll go back up to the photos like I often do for you guys so you can enjoy the pictures. Now, pricing is not cheap on these. So Steel Racer is 13,800 euro, and the Rocket Man is another 1,000 euro on top of it. And the reason is the Rocket Man is a limited 50-piece edition. The Steel Racer is not. The Rocket Man comes on a rubber strap. The Steel Racer is integrated sports bracelet style. It's 42.5 millimeters in diameter. These are 14.3 millimeter thick watches, 14.8 millimeter lug to lug. So most people are going to find them pretty wearable. The Rocket Man is in a black PVD case. Still stainless steel, but it's PVD coated. And then you got the standard stainless steel look to the Steel Racers. The Steel Racer comes with either a blue or a black dial. You only have the black dial with the Rocket Man. And then the way they've done it is the hours, minutes, and small seconds are at the 10 o'clock position. We'll get to the photo here in a moment. And then you have the central second hand 30-minute counter for the chronograph stuff. Well, the central second's obviously in the center. 30-minute counter at the 3 o'clock. And then you have a subdial with a 12-hour counter for the chronograph at the 6 o'clock. So anyway, go ahead and get back up to the photos, because in true Löbner German tradition, very Glashütte Lange, the style of German I like, not the Bauhaus movement, precision asymmetry. That's what caught my eye about these watches. So you activate the chronograph feature with the center seconds thing going on. You've got your counter, your minute counter here. Here's your hour counter, hour, minute, small seconds for the timekeeping all over here in the a very unique decision. Now, you might be looking at this and going, where's the crown? And I actually checked the 12 o'clock first because I thought maybe they were doing like a De Bethune thing. No, it's hidden. Yeah, this slides. So this slides up out of the way. You have your chronograph buttons, and that covers the crown, which, even though you have an asymmetrical dial, so there it is in position. Notice how balanced it ends up making the flanks of the case look. So you still have a difference. There's an asymmetry to it because you have the chronograph pushers that seem to slide right in. So design-wise, I thought this was a very, very interesting case and dial combination. So very, very interesting. Again, do people pay $15,000 for a brand new brand out of Germany? I have zero idea. Asymmetry is difficult to pull off in a way that a lot of people are going to appreciate. And again, I think they've done a decent job of this. I'm not quite sure if it follows the same sort of not grammar design. That's a Grand Seiko thing, but the golden ratio sort of stuff that Longa does with their very, very, Longa's asymmetry is exceedingly mathematical. And it took a lot of iterations, is my understanding, because they kept, you're trying to make something that's balanced aesthetically and working with asymmetry at the same time. It's all very, very deliberate. I do think Lasciuto Original's asymmetrical pano line actually looks really good too. I owned one for a while. I did get rid of it, but I did own one and I enjoyed the look to it. And I think this overall really clean look. Maybe not to the same precision levels and may not have that same kind of romantic pull to it. I think part of that is no date. They're using chronograph aspects here to try and fill out the dial, but you still have a pretty big amount of white space, and obviously the Löbner name doesn't fill it. So there's some aspects that don't feel to the same precision balancing that we would get out of a Longa 1, but a Longa 1 is also a significantly more expensive watch. So anyway, I thought it was very interesting. My biggest negative, where I would never consider this watch, is this. It says highly modified, but I do not trust Valjoux. Ever since I had a Valjoux chronographs, ever since, which Edda now owns, and so Swatch now owns that. But we don't care about the history. Valjoux's chronograph movements and their rotors. I had a watch, a Hamilton, that used that, despised it, hated how it felt on the wrist, hated how it felt moving around. This definitely doesn't have the thickness problem that Hamilton did, so this is probably okay. But the bottom line is, I have zero interest in chronographs that are modeled off of Valjoux movements, period. And that's probably just plain old bias at this point. And I honestly should give it a chance. But you know what? I'd have to try it on because there's no way I'm taking a chance at basically $14,000 to $15,000. I wouldn't do it. But overall, I think it looks pretty nice. So, like, aesthetically, I like it. All right, Pixel Bunch. No matter what the price point is, I can't seem to get behind integrated bracelets. The bracelet has to be basically perfect, or if you want to swap, you're usually just stuck with the brand's own strap. Very good point. And I had a Tissot PRX, and I only kept it for a few months, and then I sold it. And it wore okay. It wore a little larger. I got mine either right when or just before the smaller, like 35 millimeters came out. And given the added link distance of the integration, it wore bigger than I wanted it to. And so I wasn't super thrilled with it. Now, maybe you'd like it like this. Now, granted, this is the limited one, but the integrated rubber bracelet, maybe that helps solve some of that problem. And I do like how Tissot is doing it, where they are offering you other strap types, not just you'd get this bracelet and then you could like quick release it and then put on a rubber version instead. But you are trapped into their line of straps. And I think it used to feel like, to a lot of us, at least to me, where it seemed like watch manufacturers like Grand Seiko and such were going with, here, let's do 21 millimeter lug width and let's do 23 millimeter lug width, Tudor and the Black Bay bronze, to almost like shoehorn you into using their straps. That's happened so often now that a lot of third-party straps are doing odd width straps. And so I have baggies of straps, and I even have like basically from 18 to 20 to 23. I actually like have all of in between in 1 millimeter increments because I've ended up with all sorts of odd. Maybe I don't have a 19. I'm not sure. I have to check, but I have a number of odd widths at this point. So maybe this is the new way to make you do it. Honestly, I don't think that's the motivation. I think Löbner did this because, as a lot of us know, especially with the pandemic, integrated sports bracelet watches just became the new hotness. They got like how 2022 was the year of the green dial, and like 2018, 2019 was the year of the bronze case. Integrated sports watches got really big, and now I think they're kind of peaking. You've got like the Christopher Ward 12, the Tissot PRX. Like there are affordable ones now. You don't need to go $14,000 to $15,000 to get an integrated sports bracelet watch. When you're coming into this space, you're starting to have to make other decisions. Like, do you want to go ahead and add $5,000 I think, maybe used, and go with a Moser Streamliner? And then once you're getting to that price point, you're probably asking yourself, do I want to add $1,000 or $2,000 on top of that and maybe get a Parmigiani Tonda? And then at that point, maybe you're willing to be on the wait list and say, let's go ahead and add, $10,000 and get on the Royal Oak list. I don't know. All I'm saying is, this is a weird price point to move in with an integrated bracelet watch because it's way more than the affordable options. And I think where there's the most opportunity for an integrated sports bracelet watch is some stuff that's really like in that $4,000 to $8,000 retail price range. I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on like, is there like a good contender in that space? Because I feel like Zenith Defy has some integrated bracelet watches, and again, I don't own any integrated bracelet right now. They're not my. That's why I owned a Tissot, was to get the feel like was I going to like it or not. And my ultimate reaction was, yeah, it was okay, but I didn't love it. I look at them from time to time, but the problem is, it's like most of the ones like that everyone talks about are over $20,000 retail, and once you go under $10,000 retail, it's more like you basically go under $2,000 retail, and that's where the others are. There's nothing else I know of that's just like really in that space. And maybe that's because to do a good design, you have to really throw a lot of money at it, and otherwise you might as well just do a cheap design. I don't know. Maybe Frederic Constant has something in that space. I'm not sure. But let's go ahead and get through the rest of the chats. Neff says, I like the dial. That's about it. Okay. That was the thing that caught my eye too. Plus, I thought it was kind of cool to have this slidey. I just thought it was neat that it slid in a way to try and give it balance to the flank, which normally, I mean, people I don't think look to that because we've lived with watches for so long where the crown is at the 3 o'clock position that we're used to that, having that level of asymmetry to the watch. But I thought it was an interesting effort. Tuna says, this brand might have significance in Germany, but anywhere else? Honestly, it's going to be a tough go of it, period, because they're coming in at a really high price point, and it is a new brand. So here's this new brand coming out, and they're trying, you have no history. And I think the strategy that they're relying on, Tuna, is they're selling it through Bucherer. And maybe that's the thought. Bucherer will essentially transfer pedigree to them because it's such a well-established retail brand. I mean, Carl F. Bucherer, the brand of watch, those things take a nosedive secondhand. If you want to look into getting like 18 karat gold watches, go to Chrono 24, search for 18 karat gold under Carl F. Bucherer. I've done a few of the searches because, wow, those are actually some of the lowest priced modern gold watch cases. So if you're looking for a dress watch and you want precious metal and you don't mind used, definitely take a look and see that, because most of their designs are pretty conservative. So they fit right with the dress watch aesthetic. And if you want gold, hey, I mean, there are a lot of brands that almost all gold watches take a dive secondhand. So you'll save money versus retail in almost all instances going gray or secondhand on a dress watch. But some dive more than others. So just anyway, just one of those interesting things. Frank says he doesn't like the looks of an integrated bracelet. Yeah. Seems a few of you find them a little polarizing. Tuna says, I can't get behind the whole integrated bracelet thing. Well, more than a few of you. A lot of you are not into integrated bracelets. So I don't think any of you are going to tell me about how great my plan was, though I have like an $8,000 retail integrated bracelet watch. But that's okay. I wasn't going to make one anyway. Eddie says, I have a lot of G-Shock, so I have to go with whatever they put on the watch, which usually fits my wrist okay. Yeah, I actually I have one G-Shock, Eddie, and what I did is I went to Barton watch bands, which are they're lower price. They have a lot of silicone bands though. I have a square G-Shock. And they have the hardware. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt to install because I had to take the case back off to get it positioned right. But basically, I was able to take off that integrated resin strap and then put on the hardware, which I think lets it have 20 millimeter watch straps. And I went ahead and the kit came with a silicone band. So much more comfortable than the resin. I actually like the resin that G-Shocks tend to come with okay until it gets wet. But the problem is I wear my G-Shock when I like do anything outside, so I sweat and then it gets icky. I just like how it feels is icky. It's easy to clean, but silicone to me is a lot more comfortable wet than resin. So just as an experiment, I would suggest looking at. There are other places that sell hardware like that, but it was only I think on the order of like $30 or something. So you might want to, if you're interested in exploring other strap types like sailcloth or just anything like you want to try standard strap widths, you can get conversion kits that you can put on a G-Shock, and you can always just swap it back if you hate it too. So I just go ahead and I'm not gonna plug Barton specifically, other than that's the one I used, and it made my wearing experience for the G-Shock a lot better. Like I really look forward to putting it on. Whereas before, me wearing the G-Shock, I liked the G-Shock itself, but the strap was just kind of like I'm stuck with it, right? And it turns out no. A lot of people complained about that, so they've come with other options to let you get around that. You just have to go outside of Casio's products that they sell specifically. Pixel Punch says, what would you do if you bought an $8,000 integrated bracelet watch, got it sized, and didn't like how it fit? Laugh out loud. That's what I would be most afraid of. Very good point. So that's where Watchbox, which I guess is now going to be called the 1916 company. I bought a few watches from Watchbox. I like Watchbox. But that's where what I would normally do is go with a place that would have a return policy. So see if they would let you wear the watch. And, but of course, usually there's the little tag. And once you take the tag off, you lose your chance. Very, very good point. So normally what I have done when I have bought, because I'm not near every single dealer, when I usually would buy used, I size my watches myself usually. The only time I didn't was my Omega because I could not get the links out with their Loctite. Even with a hairdryer, I could not break those. I finally took it to a watch shop and had them size it. Better than that, I've sized my own. I'd put up with it with 6 months and then I'd trade it to another watch and just take a bit of a loss on it. That's what I've done in the past with watches where I got them and like that Portuguese. Again, I bought it used, so I didn't take that much of a loss, but still, I mean, I think I lost at least $1,000 on it. I mean, it happens. It's a fair thing to be afraid of. Don't let me downplay it. Who wants to lose a couple $1,000s on a product that you didn't even wear for a year? It sucks. So yeah, maybe stay away from them outright. That'd be a fair point. That's part why the way in my mindset, you can usually get. I don't think they're going to change all that. Maybe I'm too much of a non-luxury person to think the proper way, but that's where I'm like, let's get a Tissot PRX. I got a quartz one, so it wasn't even, those are like $400 retail, and I bought it for less than that. And then it's like, I'm going to try that out, and then I'm going to see, do I love integrated sports watches? And if I did, I'd have sold the Tissot and bought another integrated sport, like maybe get a Defy. It was okay, but I didn't love it. So I sold the Tissot, and I don't have an integrated sports watch. So what I do is I'm willing to experiment on a cheaper watch that has the form of what I think I'm going to try out. Even if I don't love the dial or the case, I'm looking at sizing. I'm looking at lug to lug, diameter, thickness, clasp system. Evaluating all of those in the cheap product, knowing that a higher end product is probably going to have a silkier feeling bracelet. Maybe it's going to be lighter. It's going to have screws instead of, cotter pins or whatever. All those other things. You got to factor all that in. But it gets you a relatively decent proxy. And then the assumption will be if I go for the higher end thing, it's just going to be that, but more refined. like the sharp edges to the Tissot PRX. The bracelet I felt kind of had sharp edges to it. Not like cut yourself sharp, but it felt cheap. It looked nice, but it felt cheap. And my assumption would be a Nautilus wouldn't have that problem. But that would give me the experience of how it would wear. And they wear bigger than the specs suggest. Some sites, some review sites will even tell you the lug-to-lug of the case and then the lug-to-lug including the integrated links because they have no flexibility to them. So in reality, that's how it's going to wear. So it's stuff like that. Neff says, I have 3 integrated bracelet watches. My digital PRX. Oh, yeah, you did get that. I had someone comment on my video, First Thoughts video on the digital PRX as an aside, who just came in to say how they were like really mad that a lot of people weren't complaining about I think the price of those. Like they hated the price. So that just reminded me. An Aquas. I forgot the Aquas was integrated. Interesting. And the Dumanoir. The Dumanoir. I'm probably saying that wrong. I think I'm saying it like some sort of food, but they're okay if they're balanced. And that's the issue I find with the extreme taper bracelets. Yeah. And the Tissot bracelet, I thought tapered fairly aggressively. I do like bracelets and straps to taper. I'm looking at you, Omega 300M, and your huge old block of steel. I have it back on the bracelet, my Omega. Now because we're getting into cooler weather and I like it how it feels better in the colder weather, but that watch is going back on silicone once it warms up because God, that thing is a chunky monster. Jeez. But they don't need to be like that level of tapering is super aggressive. Plus I usually, because my wrist is 6.75 inches, I usually have to take a lot of links out. So for me, it like starts thick and then just goes right away because of how I usually take out the from the edge moving towards the clasp is how I tend to do it. But because I'm also trying to keep the center of the clasp to the center of my wrist. So I take them out on both sides and it's a thing. I almost always get a watch with bracelet if it comes with bracelet, but I'm telling you, even though I size them myself, I hate doing it. It's such a pain. Getting things on rubber straps and leather straps is so much. I'm just like, wow, this is a much nicer, it's a much nicer experience. But anyway, that's it for today's live stream. I hope you enjoyed us going over those 5 new watches and that line of Breitling Avengers. Sorry I didn't have time to fully memorize all of the details ahead of time. I just put too much stuff together back to back to back. But we got through it. Those of you who were able to tune in live, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Helps the video, I think, somehow in the search if you click like. So if you're willing to do that, I'd appreciate that. Otherwise, there's links to all the stuff in the video description, the 99 Cent Club, the Discord channel, all the articles we talked about today. You can go and enjoy those to your heart's content, learn about these watches and then look at the price point and go, well, it was neat to learn about. Anyway, I should be back next Saturday. Don't know what the topics are yet. We'll find out what watch reveals happen during the week. Also, you can always leave a comment on the video in the comment section about what you want to see in the next video. I'm always open to feedback. It doesn't have to be the current releases. We sometimes do more theoretical topics. So we can do whatever you guys want to talk about. But I appreciate you all watching me. You didn't have to. You had plenty of other places to go. I hit the space bar, so now we get to see Neff's comment one more time. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.